Welcome to the Long Thread podcast about spinning, stitching, and weaving by hand. The podcast is presented by Long Thread Media, publishers of Spin-Off, Handwoven, Piecework, and Little Looms magazines. Find us online at longthreadmedia.com. Trinway Silks is where weavers, spinners, knitters, and stitchers find the silk they love. Select from the largest variety of silk spinning fibers, silk yarn, and silk threads and ribbons at trinwaysilks.com. You'll discover a rainbow of colors thoughtfully hand-dyed in Colorado. Love natural? Trinway's array of wild silks provide choices beyond white. If you love silk, you'll love Trinway Silks, where superior quality and customer service are guaranteed. Brown Sheep Company is a 4-generation family business bringing you high-quality wool and natural fiber yarns. We spin and dye U.S.-grown wool into hundreds of vibrant colors at our mill in western Nebraska. Our mill has something to offer for every craft, from our well-known knitting and crocheting yarns to wool roving for spinning and felting. We offer U.S.-made needlepoint yarn as well as yarn on cones for weaving projects. Learn more about our company and products at brownsheep.com. I'm your host, Long Thread Media co-founder Anne Marrow. Hazel Tindall is from Shetland, the islands northeast of Scotland, known for their rich knitting traditions. In her knitting career, she's been a designer, production knitter, teacher, and the world's fastest knitter. Well, Hazel, thanks so much for being here.
That's fine. Thank you for asking me.
So, there's sort of two main things that I know about you. One is that you're a Shetlander, and one is that you have been named the world's fastest knitter. And those two things go hand in hand, right? Can you tell me a little bit about being a Shetland knitter and the world's fastest knitter?
Well, I've been a knitter most of my life. I can remember learning to read, but I can't remember learning to knit. My only memory of starting to knit is looking at a row of stitches to try to identify what was knit and what was purl. And I remember when I was probably about maybe 8 or 9, going to visit a grandaunt, and she was sitting watching me knitting. And this is in Shetland, so it might not make sense to you, but she said to my mother, she said, "Your lassie's awful good fine wear," which meant that I was knitting very efficiently. I had a good knack. So I guess that I've always been able to knit efficiently. But yeah. I grew up watching all ladies. I don't remember seeing men knitting, but they were all knitting because it was essential to get that income. They had no other way of earning money. There weren't any jobs, and even if there were jobs, they didn't have the transport to get there, because we lived in quite a rural area. There was no public transport. It was all walk, or if you were rich enough, you might have a cycle. And but it was very much watching people knitting who were knitting to earn money. Mm-hmm. And I just I liked knitting, and I would knit for anybody that needed anything. And throughout my teens, I knitted Fair Isle yokes for sale. The bodies, the plain bodies, were usually machine knitted by somebody else. And then we got the bodies to add the yokes into. And that was where I practiced using colour for the first time.
Oh.
But there's no evidence. I know that I made some horrible looking things. But back then, that was, we're speaking about the early 60s, late 50s, and nobody took photos willy-nilly. And to take photos of your knitting would never have crossed anybody's mind, because for the benefit of the younger viewers, listeners, in those days you bought your film. In our case, we would have had to go into Lerwick, which was 20-odd miles away. You took all these photos, and then they went to the chemist and got developed, and a week later, maybe you would get them back, pay your money, and then half of them would be rubbish. So to waste...
I remember that.
To waste all that on a photo of your knitting was no. So then I just kept on knitting, and I would have been in my mid mid-20s before I started to knit on a Sunday, because when I was little, knitting was work, so they didn't knit on Sunday. But I have heard about people who really wanted to get something finished on a Saturday evening, so they would move the handles on the clock to fool anybody that was looking so that they wouldn't be knitting on a Sunday. But I would have been in my mid-20s before I thought, oh, this is my hobby. I can surely knit on a Sunday. So now I knit 7 days a week. And the fastest knitter thing came about back in 2004, I think. I was I still am a member of the Shetland Guild of Spinners, Knitters, Weavers and Dyers. And at that time, knitting wasn't so popular. We didn't have so many members. And we were also at the same time trying to run the Shetland Textile Museum. It had a slightly different name then. And all the guild's time and effort, or a lot of it, was spent on running the museum. And at the same time, we weren't getting huge numbers of visitors, because back in the early 2000s, knitting hadn't sort of risen to the popularity it has today. So we were always looking for ways of attracting people to our annual fundraiser. And that year, one of the committee members had said, oh, I've been looking online and they say the fastest knitter can do, I think it was something like 180 stitches in 3 minutes. And so we thought, well, let's have a competition and see what we can do. So nearly everybody managed to exceed what she'd read about. And I was the first one of the guild members. And that year we were going down to England on holiday. So it was decided we would make a little... My husband was still alive then, and we were going down to see his family. And we took a little detour down to London, where the competition was taking place at a big knitting and stitches show. And when I got there, I had to qualify. And the first time I failed. So they sent me up. The numbers had gone up since we'd seen it online. So they sent me away to have coffee and come back and try again. I think they felt sorry for me that I trailed 600 miles to take part. But anyway, I got to take part, and I think there was just 4 of us in the competition. So I usually say most of the world didn't know there was a competition. And there was the American representative was a German-born lady. I've forgotten her name. And there was a Russian-born lady. And then there was the existing title holder who was English. So I won that competition. And then 4 years later, there was one in Minneapolis in February. And in the cold.
Wonderful vacation destination.
Yes. It was a place to go for a long weekend. But that time, it was a different group of competitors. There was a Canadian girl. There was Miriam Tegels from the Netherlands, who by that time was the Guinness World Record holder, and she still is. And there was an American. And in America, we got to do just garter stitch. Garter stitch. And we had 3 time sessions. And each time, I think everybody got a bit faster. But I won that one as well. Miriam, the Guinness record holder, came second. But they were all using circular needles. I was the only one with straight needles. They didn't allow me to use a knitting belt, so I used single-pointed needles, a needle which was anchored in my groin, because I need to keep the needle still. And so that's how I came to get the title. And if anything has changed, nobody's told me if I'm not. So, yeah. But it's a pretty boring thing to watch. So as far as I know, there hasn't been another competition.
Interesting. I think of it as being so exciting, but I guess it's not like going around a track. It's not, there's
No.
not that sort of, yes. And now a word from our sponsors. The Adirondack Wool and Arts Festival is the perfect way to spend a weekend surrounded by over 150 craft vendors in Greenwich, New York. Discover a curated group of vendors featuring the best of wool and artisan crafters. Throughout the weekend, enjoy workshops, free horse-drawn wagon rides, free kids crafts, a fiber sheep show, and a sanctioned cashmere goat show. Join us September 20th and 21st, 2025, and every fall. For more information, visit adkwoolandarts.com. That's adkwoolandarts.com. And now back to the show.
No.
So the Shetland style of knitting, though, is particularly conducive to this, right? Can you tell me a little bit about a knitting belt for those of us who haven't seen one in use?
Well, there's lots of stuff online that you can watch, but yes, the knitting belt is a padded oval shape, and it's filled with horsehair, and it's used with double-pointed needles. I find it easier with long double-pointed needles, and when I say long, you'll be thinking inches. Probably the longest you can buy is 16 inches, which is really a bit too long for my liking. I think 12 is better. 12, 14 or 16 seem to be the sizes. And you put the working needle, that's the empty needle, into the belt, and that holds that working needle fairly steady. You don't have to grip the needle, you just sort of lean your hand on it. And then you make the stitches by flicking your index finger. You don't lift your hand. And the hand, your right hand is over the needle. And there's some people that have their thumb under the needle. That tends to be people who've learned in England, and it's not so easy, I think, to get speed up that way.
But, I think that a lot of people have switched to knitting on circular needles. And I think that is one of the trends of the last 30 years or so.
Yeah, I think
so?
I think the manufacturers have done a very good job at selling them. But I don't like circular needles. I think that it's not as good for your posture because you kind of can curl down around your circular because the weight is all falling on your lap. Whereas if you have your knitting belt, you're knitting with the points of your needles roughly at the centre of your body and above waist height. And if you're using a circular, it's kind of hard to do that, I think. And one other advantage is that a lot of people are knitting when it's really hot. Well, if you have a straight needle, you can swap which end you start with, so you have a cooler end. I've just done that now as I'm sitting knitting. So the new empty needle is a bit cooler than the one I've just let go of. And the other thing I noticed with a circular needle, you're always shunting the stitches over the join.
Yes.
And I did a little experiment a while ago where I had a lot of stitches, maybe several hundred on a circular, and I was having to pause to move stitches after every maybe 20, 30. Whereas with a straight needle, I could maybe manage 50 before I was having to shunt the stitches along. So
I think of that as being just one of the characteristics of Shetland knitting. I don't know if anybody else, I should look that up, but anybody else who uses the knitting belt. But there are so many specialties of Shetland knitting. There's the lace tradition and the colorwork tradition. And it seems like just such a special place such a rich place to be a knitter.
Yes, it certainly was as I was growing up. But we've kind of lost a generation or two of knitters. People who don't see knitting at home every day. And I think that's made a huge difference. And a lot of the younger ones are knitting on circulars as opposed to the straight needles. But not everybody in Shetland used a knitting belt traditionally. My father's family all came from the north end of Shetland mainland, and they all knit it with the yarn in their left hand, what you would call
okay.
yeah. And
Yes.
but none of us, and I've asked my older cousins, none of us can remember how they did it with two colours. Did they have both in the left hand, or did they have one in each hand? We can't remember that, because it was just something that happened and you didn't stop and ask and look and take photos. So
Yes.
my father's sisters and his mother all did it with the yarn in their left hand, and they didn't use a belt. And much more important than a belt is to have a string around your knitting.
A string around your knitting?
A string, yeah. As soon as you cast on, then once you get a few rows done, if you put just a piece of strong cotton, loosely woven through the cast-on edge, but before I had a knitting belt, and I didn't get my first belt till I was in my teens, then I would use a nappy pin, a diaper pin, and fasten it to my back. And that lifts the knitting away from your left hand. It takes all the weight off your left hand.
Oh, okay.
And that holds it steady. The other thing a string does is because you're putting a bit of tension on your knitting, it elongates the stitch and you can get into it faster. And I'm told that it works with a circular needle too, though I've never tried it.
So this is a very practical tip. And I remember seeing that you have actually a whole video of practical tips that you've picked up from a lifetime of being a knitter.
Yeah. I got together with Elizabeth Johnston and we spent a while planning what we could put in, and we ended up calling it 50 Tips from Shetland Knitters, but I think we can't count very well, and I think there's probably a lot more than 50, but 50 seemed a good number to speak about. So, yeah, so she came with things that I didn't know about. I mean, she's really good at fingers on gloves. She came from a family who knitted gloves, so she's very, very good at getting neat fingers. Because when you're knitting gloves, it can be tricky to get where the fingers join the hand, can be quite tricky.
Yes, you can sometimes wind up with gaps there and ladders and
not attractive.
Not attractive.
But between us, we came up with a lot of different things.
You mentioned that there hadn't been as many knitters and that you were trying to sort of get some enthusiasm. But one of the things that's come up in Shetland is the Shetland Wool Week, and you've been the patron of that, right?
Yes. Shetland Wool Week has been a massive success, and it attracts a lot of visitors. Well, Shetland's not that big, so if we're getting upwards of 1,000 people coming, that's a lot of people for Shetland. We don't have that much accommodation and so on, and it's not a cheap place to come to because the cost of travel here is quite high, but it's been a massive, massive success, and they have different patrons every year, and it's a great way of supporting local wool producers. So it's been a huge success.
That's a big change, though, from when you were younger and knitting was the cottage industry and everybody did it and you did it to sell. And now it's something that's an attraction where people come and seek you out. I say you, I mean, Shetland knitters, partly for the beautiful things you make, but partly because this is just such a unique and special place of knitting.
Yes, it's really made a huge difference to lives. And one of the things that people are beginning to realise that we have something quite special with the knitters here. And it's kind of taking a long time for that to reach to the cream to reach the top, maybe. But what I find is speaking to people, because I'm still I still do a little bit of demonstrating for the Shetland Textile Museum. And I think my patron went wrong while I was talking, so I'll just leave it for now. I can see that it's gone off. Probably I've taken two together by accident. But anyway, speaking to other people who demonstrate at the Textile Museum, there are names on the list that I don't know, which is wonderful. And there's one lady I spoke to, and she said, it's the highlight of my week coming to the museum to demonstrate. Because they're meeting the visitors, they're using the skills, and they're sharing with people what they enjoy doing. But they're sort of all my vintage, which is over retirement age mostly. But I suppose the young people are still working. But as the retirement age in this country rises, I think it's maybe 66 or 67 now, whereas it used to be 60. People have worked so long that they might not feel like volunteering anymore. But who knows how it'll go. But yeah, the people who go to meet the visitors really enjoy it.
And that textile museum is pretty amazing. I mean, I have not been to visit it myself, but you mentioned that you didn't necessarily take pictures of your knitting, but there are some extraordinary photos of people, stretching the jumpers on the boards, or stretching out their lace.
Yeah, there's some absolutely stunning stuff in the collection, and they vary the display every year. It's something different. So this year, they've part of the exhibition is dedicated to showing the wrong sides of garments.
Love that.
You get to see what the wrong side looks like. And then this absolutely stunning piece of lace from 1937. I think that it was probably going to be a gift for royalty because the date is on it. And there's a crown made out of lace, and the needles in the yarn is tiny. I would need a magnifying glass to be able to count how many stitches is on that scarf. And it used to be that a lot of places would send things to royalty on special occasions, and very often the knitter would knit a copy of what they gave to royalty to keep for themselves, which is a massive knit. Huge, yes. So
it is, but otherwise you'd never see it again.
Well, exactly, yes. Because I remember hearing from a friend of mine who was involved in giving something to Princess Diana, and she said that she eventually saw it being worn by one of the ladies in waiting. So at least somebody was wearing it, which was good. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned that Elizabeth's family, knitted gloves. Did people specialize in different things? Because I noticed we've been talking about, you were talking about color, but there is a whole separate lace tradition. So is it something how did you sort of develop your specialty?
I think that I've just always liked color. But I remember seeing a cousin of mine had knitted a beautiful lace scarf, and she would have been, I think she's maybe 8 years older than me, so I would have been about 7 or 8. She would have been towards the end of her school time, and she made this beautiful, I can see it in my head, it was lemon, and it was lace, and it was just beautiful. And I said to my mother, I would like to knit that. And she said, she says, it's too hard. Stick with a fair isle. I think she couldn't be bothered to teach me. But my mother didn't like knitting, and she never did understand my enjoyment of it. But for her, it was when she was very young, then her aunt, who was a widow, and that was the only income that she had, she was her mother figure. And she was forever saying, get on with your knitting. And one of the poems that my mother wrote has a line that says, it's okay for boys to be reading books, but there's always something for a girl to do. So get on with your knitting. And I think that maybe pushes off. But I think that maybe if I'd started knitting lace, I might have knitted a bit more. But I don't knit a lot of lace. I like colour too much. And I keep trying to knit something with subtle colours, gentle, but I fail at that mostly. I like bright things. And as somebody said not long ago, the world needs brightness more than ever. So I try to do my bit to make the world a bit brighter.
Yes. Do you work from patterns, or do you sketch things, or do you sort of have it all in your head?
Mostly I just know how many stitches I'm going to need. So I know as I knit roughly 7 stitches to the inch. It kind of varies depending on the needle, but 7 is a good number to work with. So today I cast on, I don't know whether it's going to be a sleeveless thing or it'll have sleeves. It might depend on what time I've got. And so I was sort of thinking, well, how many stitches will I need? So I've cast on 280, and that'll be about a 40 when it's finished. And then I haven't decided what's going to happen next. I'm just doing what we would call the basque, and that would be spelled BASQUE, which would be the pattern at the hem. And then
I see. Okay.
Yeah, I'll increase the stitches a bit, not too many. I might go up to 300 and slightly bigger needles, and then I'm not sure what kind of patterns are coming next. So this might be quite a deep pattern at the bottom to give me thinking time. But no, I don't do a lot of planning. And for a garment, I'll be thinking, I like the paddled ones, the ones that have vertical patterns, rather than the horizontal bands of patterns. And one of the reasons for that is that if you're short and stout, you need something that'll draw the eye upwards, because the colours automatically are going horizontally when you change them.
Right.
But when I speak about pattern, I'm meaning motif. I think. Yeah. So if you have your patterns going up, then it gives maybe not an illusion of height.
No, it's sort of that vertical, that lengthening. Yeah.
And the other reason I like that is that once you've got that pattern set, once it's established, you just keep going. Whereas with the horizontal bands of pattern, you're forever having to set the next one. If you have a 5-row pattern and then you do some plain rows, well, in a bit you're going to have to set a whole new pattern, which if you accidentally take 2 and 2 together, which I very often do, then that can throw it if you've had a plain row. So, yeah.
Do you have somebody in mind as the recipient for this, or is it just
I think
something that you're working out the ideas of?
I think it might be me.
Good.
Not that I need another jumper, but I think that it might be nice. Yes.
Well, good.
Every year, one of the Shetland businesses, Jimison and Smith, have what they call a colour box challenge, and they pick 8 colours which don't really go together, that a normal knitter would never grab and say, I'm making something out of this. Well, you have to use at least 5, and you create anything you like from it. So I usually try and enter. It is a nice challenge because this year's colours there's a dark green, and there's another one. The label says it's green, but it's kind of more of like an aqua colour. And then there's cerise and crimson and
so like a bluish red and a more of an orangish red or a true red.
And a purple and a lilac. I think that's 8 colours. Oh, there's a pale lemon.
That's an interesting mix.
It is an interesting mix. But it's really quite fascinating because once you've got the yarn and made whatever you're going to make, it gets entered to the local shows. The summer shows are everything from animals to handicrafts to baking to anything. And at one of the shows in particular, you can sort of go into a room and a lot of the stuff is colour box challenge stuff. And it's absolutely amazing what people have made. So it's quite a competition I quite enjoy. And last year I made myself a jumper and I also made a sleeveless top. And this year it's not been so easy. The colours haven't gone together.
They haven't spoken to you quite the same way?
No. Yeah.
So how did you make the transition from knitting being work to knitting being a hobby? Or is it kind of both?
Now it's a bit of both. But when I was at school and college, I was earning money while I was studying. And then I started work. But even I worked in London in the early 70s. And even then, I knitted for somebody in Shetland for a bit. And then I think I probably got fed up with that and just was knitting for myself. And sometimes I would get commissions from work colleagues. They knew that I would knit, and they would sometimes ask me to knit things. And then when I had children, I knitted for them, but I also sewed for them. So I made most of their clothes until they went to school. And then I went through a crochet phase. I was 19 before I saw anybody crochet. And it was my husband's uncle who had been injured in World War II, and he'd learned to crochet as part of his recovery. And he would sit and crochet and I would watch, and never once did I say, can you show me? But when he died, I got his hooks and his unfinished pieces and all his patterns. And it was then that I got a book and taught myself how to do it. But I watched him so much that I knew what it should look like. So it wasn't hard to learn. So I did a lot of crochet for a while. I did jumpers, and I didn't bother much with doilies and, the lace mats, but I certainly made my husband at least 2 jumpers that uses a lot more yarn than knitting. But
yes,
and I made ones for myself as well. But I don't crochet so much now. I think the eyesight's not as good as it was, and you're always looking to see where the hook needs to go in. So
yes,
you can't really watch TV and crochet so well. Whereas knitting, I do most of it by feel. You can feel whether it's right or wrong, and I can feel that this is not right. Yes, it is. No,
yes, there are people who love to crochet. They find it so freeing because you can put the hook anywhere. But for people who prefer knitting, well, you could put the hook anywhere. How do you know what to do? So,
well, when I put my, I see what you mean. Yes, you could put you have to be consistent about where you put that hook. Otherwise, you can see it doesn't look so good. But it's very easy to accidentally rip back your crochet. So I always have a short coloured thread that I put through the last loop that I've made, the last chain, and then it can't undo. But crochet is, for me, it's probably more portable because knitting I'm going with, well, usually if I go out, I'm using maybe 8-inch short needles. And then I don't always use a belt.
Mhm.
But the problem with not using a belt is I get T-shirts with holes in them because I always need to brace that needle against my body.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you mainly knit jumpers? I know that for Piecework magazine, you recently knitted a baby sweater, and there's a scarf in a upcoming issue. But do you ever knit things like socks and gloves and mittens?
I do a lot of hand coverings. Yeah, socks very rarely because who can see them except myself? But Shetland wool needs something added to it for the heels and the toes. And the last pair I made, I wear them in my walking boots because they're nice and warm, but they're light. And I did, for the heels, I increased the stitch numbers and went down the needle size or 2. But the hole has come on just above above where I added that extra layer of protection. So but I do a lot of, I call them hand warmers because they just stop in a straight line above your knuckles, and then you don't have to bother with any kind of fingers. And if you need extra warmth, well, you just wear a pair of cotton gloves underneath. So, and gloves, a pair of gloves takes a whole lot longer to knit. So yeah, but for putting things to the Shetland Textile Museum, little things are what people buy. And if you put in something like a jumper, a sweater, there, you also have to think about who might wear it if it doesn't sell. Because you'd invest in maybe 80, 90 hours of time and quite a lot of money on the yarn. So you really have to think that it's going to be worn. So if I make a jumper to fit me, it's really not going to fit anybody else because I have really short arms. So I'm better knitting sleeveless things than
sense.
Yes. So, and then the buyer doesn't have elbows to worry about when they get it. And if your body is warm, the rest of you is warm.
Yes. So have you always used about the same kind of wool? I was thinking of you, being, 20 miles from Lerwick to, and you knitted a lovely hat not that long ago, of course, for piecework. But have you always used about the same kind of wool? Have you always used the Shetland traditional wool?
Yeah, when I was very little, then when the sheep was shorn, and that was all done, at home, then the bags of wool would be packed up and posted off to somewhere on the Scottish mainland, and it was spun for you. And then we would get back this big bag of, it was hanks of yarn, and I'm not sure if we could choose the colours or whether they just said just what they felt like. And I don't believe that we always got our own wool back, but I might be a bit sceptical about that. But a lot of the wool came in the post when I was very small. And I remember when I was maybe, 7 or 8, and I saw a pattern for a little girl's cardigan in a magazine, and I pleaded with my mother, I wanted to knit this. And she was very reluctant because it meant it wasn't Shetland wool it was made of, and she would have to buy the yarn to match the pattern. But anyway, she bought it, and I knitted it in, because I think she didn't maybe believe that I would actually knit it.
And you did.
But it was a really simple knit and purl pattern, maybe like a basket stitch or something. But I haven't got it in. It's probably my younger sister wore it out after I'd finished with it. But she was very reluctant to be buying that yarn. But I think she came to see that it was been worth doing.
Yes.
Yeah. And I don't often buy anything other than Shetland wool because I know how Shetland wool is going to behave, and I know that I'm not going to be disappointed. Because last month I was away and I went into a knitting shop and I came home with 2 hanks of variegated, hand-dyed yarn. And I thought it looked quite nice in the hank. And I thought, well, this time it's not going to lie in a drawer. And so I made myself knit a cardigan, but it's really not very beautiful. It's, well, I was thinking, I finished it last week and then I washed it and put it on a jumper board. The yarn feels very nice. It's silk and wool, so it feels lovely. And I took it off the jumper board tonight and I was thinking, oh, well, if I wear it, I don't have to look at it, so it's fine. But it's not. But it fits okay. And because I didn't know how far the yarn would go, I started at the neck and did it top down, which is something I don't usually do. But it meant that when it came to the sleeves, I could weigh the yarn so that I had half for each. But the second hank, although it had the same name on the label, I can see where I changed. So the sleeves at least kind of match. But it's the number of times I've bought stuff and then started something with it and it doesn't drape the same, and I have several bits. The only unfinished pieces I have are yarn I bought that's not Shetland.
Interesting.
Yeah.
There are definitely yarns that are at their most beautiful in the hank.
Yes. Yes.
That's where they look best.
Yeah. And I'm not sure maybe I should have alternated, had both balls ready and done a row in each, but it's never going to look beautiful. And then it said it needed a cold wash. And I thought, oh, maybe if I put it in a hot wash, it would all come one colour. And then that defeats the object. Well, it is.
It's risky.
Yes. Yeah. It might be even more sludgy than it is.
So what you were saying about when you were little and the yarn used to come back by post, in a way, it kind of sounds like that was your own version of the color box challenge. Well, this is the yarn you get. This is the yarn you work with. Yeah,
I guess. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But except there would always have been some left from last year. So.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But now there's this amazing array of different colors, and you can go and choose, unless you choose to be limited by a challenge, you can pick out whatever colors you want to go together.
Well, yes, as I tend to have so much yarn already that I shouldn't be buying any more. But the business of people saying that they look at photos to get the colours or the landscape, but I'm just not aware of that. And sometimes I've been asked to make up some nonsense about how I came with the colours, but believe me, the colours came first and then I had to fabricate some. But I don't do that very often. I just choose colours that I think go together or blend well.
Mm-hmm. But they can be their own inspiration. They don't need something outside.
Yeah. But I think what I see being popular isn't necessarily my taste. There's a lot of very, what I call sludgy looking. There's you can kind of see the colour, but you can't see the shape, the pattern that you've made. And if you've carefully knit it, a shape, and if you can't see it when it's finished, I think, well, what's the point? But I read somewhere that I'm very opinionated, so... Only about knitting.
Wouldn't it be boring? Wouldn't it be boring if you didn't have opinions?
I guess it would, yes.
So did you teach your children to knit?
No. Well, I have 2 boys and they learned at school, but they weren't really interested. And I think one... Well, in those days, there was a teacher that came to the primary school to knit, to do knitting with them, but she had very little time with each class, and she didn't have any budget. They didn't give her any money for providing materials. So I have a bag for clothes pegs. I know that in America nobody uses clothes pegs, but but we do them. We like to dry clothes outside here in the fresh wind.
We do too.
Well, that's good to know.
Yes.
And I have a bag that's knitted from net curtain. You know, an old net curtain that the knitting teacher had cut into strips, and she used to, all her old tights, you call them pantyhose, she would cut them into strips, and the children knit it with that. So very often she didn't have yarn for them to use. So, yeah, they both learned to knit at school. But it wasn't so good then because they taught everybody had to go to knitting, whether they were interested or not. And a lot of them just weren't. Whereas now in the schools we have Shetland Markers, which is volunteers going to the schools to teach children who want to learn. So we don't take every child, that they have to want to come. So the school that I go to, I think we had maybe 10 or 12 regulars, and they made quite a lot of progress over the time that we met them. But we had them for a whole hour, the last hour of the school week. And I remember asking one of them, what would you be doing instead? They says, playing boring computer games. So that was good.
Yeah, that's great. I think it would be so amazing to learn to knit from you. And there are other folks in your guild. It's still a place where there are just a really vibrant knitting culture.
Yes. I've learned a lot from fellow members of the guild. Yeah, they're always full of ideas, and it's nice to see what they're doing. And we've got a lot more members now, and a lot of younger people too, which is good. And there's also a lot of people who are knitting that aren't guild members. Sometimes the word guild puts people off because they think they have to be of a standard. But really, the guild is very welcoming of anybody that wants to go.
And be part of this, and be part of Shetland Wool Week as well. Is that?
Well, yes.
So it's this whole community, right?
Yeah, the guild has been chosen to be the patrons for this year, which is a great honour, and everybody's just delighted that the guild is being recognised, which is wonderful.
How many members are there in the guild?
Well, I think it's maybe 90-ish, but I'm not sure, because I'm not on the organising committee anymore. I did 6 years as chairman and 6 as treasurer, and I think I've done my bit. So
you paid your dues.
I'm not close to what's going on. So it's very nice just to be able to turn up and just go. And I usually just go to speak and meet friends. And then, not have any responsibilities. Yeah. So no, it's a nice group of people.
So folks can look this up on your website, but just to be clear, you mentioned jumper boards, which is kind of a frame for blocking a sweater. What is dressing your knitting?
Well, dressing is preparing it for its public appearance. So so we don't speak about blocking. We dress our knitwear, which means that it always gets washed, because I know that some people think steaming's okay, but you don't know where that yarn was before you bought it. And you don't know where it's been. It might have been rolling over the floor. So I always wash it. And then if I have a few pieces, I just put the whole lot in the washing machine on a wool wash. Set a reminder so that I take it out of the machine as soon as it's finished. But if I hand wash, I'll give it a quick spin in the washing machine. And then jumpers and cardigans go on a jumper board. And I have done a few blogs about jumper boards. And then hats I put on usually a food container. Sometimes, I don't like single-use plastic if I can avoid it. So my old food containers have been doing service for many years. Sometimes a cake tin, depends on the size. For a berry, I would put it on a dinner plate. And I always put a thread round the cast-on edge and pull it tight. And then you get it evens out the stitches and it just looks so much better. For a scarf, it's a long piece of wood, and I have several according to the width. And usually a scarf, they're folded lengthways, and then a cotton thread turns it into a tube. And the blocking or the dressing board goes in the middle. And then we have hat boards for dressing hats. That's a big square frame with pegs in it. It's adjustable so that you can, and that's useful for triangles as well. And the advantage is that it can stand up against a wall. You're not taking up a lot of floor space. So I have glove boards, which are wooden boards. Though if I have several pairs that I wash at the same time, I also have hand shapes that I've just cut from cereal packets. But you have to be they're a bit more fragile, and it sometimes takes a bit more effort to get the cardboard into the fingers. So, yeah.
So that, the process of knitting isn't done when you're done knitting, which I think for sometimes I am so ready to wear something when it's done. And then the thought that I have to wash it and block it.
I know it's finishing is the most important part, the final finish. Yeah.
Well, Hazel, thank you so much for telling me all about, your knitting journey, but also sharing some of the special things about being a Shetland knitter.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for asking. I hope that the listeners don't need audio captions to help them understand the accent.
Not at all. Not at all. Thanks to our sponsors for supporting the podcast. Thank you for listening to the Long Thread Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please rate the show and leave us a comment on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. Thanks again.